Everyone is connected, yet no one is real. This is the defining curse of our age. We live in an era of unprecedented connectivity, where billions of people can communicate instantly across any distance. Yet loneliness has reached epidemic levels. Authentic relationship has become increasingly rare, and the very technologies promising to bring us together have created the most isolated generation in human history. I have observed this paradox in its most extreme forms: individuals with thousands of digital connections, who cannot sustain a single meaningful relationship. People who share their most intimate thoughts with strangers online, while remaining mysteries to their own families, and communities that exist entirely in virtual spaces, while their physical neighborhoods decay from neglect and indifference. Research confirms what careful observation reveals: social media use, both active and passive, correlates with increased loneliness over time. The more connected we become digitally, the more isolated we become psychologically. The platforms designed to facilitate human connection have become sophisticated machines for manufacturing disconnection, replacing authentic relationship with performance, genuine intimacy with curated interaction. This is not accidental but inevitable, the result of confusing communication with communion, mistaking information exchange for emotional intimacy, and replacing the vulnerable, messy, demanding work of real relationship with the sanitized, controllable, instantly gratifying simulation that digital connection provides. Today, I speak of how we have created a world where everyone knows everyone and no one knows anyone, where constant communication has replaced meaningful conversation, and where the hunger for authentic connection drives people deeper into the very systems that make authentic connection impossible. Digital platforms have created a sophisticated illusion of intimacy that provides the psychological sensation of closeness, while eliminating the vulnerability, commitment, and mutual responsibility that genuine intimacy requires. This simulation feels real enough to satisfy our surface need for connection, while leaving the deeper hunger for authentic relationship perpetually unfed. The illusion operates through what researchers recognize as curated authenticity, the selective sharing of experiences, thoughts, and emotions that creates an impression of openness, while maintaining complete control over what others perceive. People share their highlights, their carefully crafted thoughts, their most flattering images, creating personas that are simultaneously based on reality and fundamentally false representations of their complete human experience. This curation extends beyond individual posts to entire online personalities that bear only passing resemblance to the complex, contradictory, evolving human beings behind the screens. The algorithm rewards consistency, positivity, and engagement-generating content, gradually shaping online personas toward increasingly artificial presentations that optimize for digital metrics rather than authentic expression. The psychological effect is profound. People begin to live for their digital personas rather than expressing their authentic selves through digital tools. The performance becomes more real than the performer, the image more important than the substance, the online reputation more valuable than offline integrity. Reality becomes subordinate to its digital representation. Meanwhile, the audience for these performances experiences what might be called intimacy substitution. The false sense of knowing someone based on their curated digital presence. Following someone's social media creates the illusion of friendship without any of the actual work, commitment, or vulnerability that friendship requires. You feel informed about their life while knowing nothing about their authentic struggles, fears, or genuine needs. This pseudo-intimacy is particularly insidious because it satisfies just enough psychological need for connection to prevent people from seeking genuine relationship, while leaving them chronically undernourished emotionally. They feel connected enough to avoid the discomfort of acknowledged loneliness, while remaining too isolated to experience the nourishment that authentic human connection provides. The result is millions of people living parallel lives of quiet desperation, performing happiness for audiences who are themselves performing happiness, creating an elaborate theater of connection, where everyone is acting and no one is authentic, everyone is communicating, and no one is truly seen or known. Social media platforms have transformed identity from an internal process of self-discovery and authentic expression into an external performance, optimized for audience approval, algorithmic promotion, and social validation. This shift has profound psychological consequences that extend far beyond online behavior into the core of how people understand themselves and their worth. The performance begins with the recognition that digital platforms reward certain types of content, personalities, and presentations while ignoring or suppressing others. Users quickly learn to emphasize aspects of themselves that generate positive responses, likes, comments, shares, follows, while hiding or minimizing aspects that don't perform well in the digital attention economy. This optimization process gradually shapes not just what people share, but how they think about themselves and their experiences. Events become opportunities for content creation, rather than moments to be lived fully. Experiences are evaluated based on their potential for generating engaging posts, rather than their intrinsic value or meaning. Life becomes subordinate to its documentation and presentation. The psychological research reveals how this external focus on performance metrics undermines internal sources of self-worth and authentic motivation. When validation comes primarily through digital responses to curated presentations, people lose touch with their genuine interests, values, and sources of satisfaction. They begin to exist primarily for others' consumption, rather than their own authentic development. The feedback loop becomes self-reinforcing. Successful performance generates validation that feels like connection, encouraging more performance and deeper investment in the digital persona. But this validation is based on the performance, rather than the authentic person behind it, creating a fundamental disconnection between public success and private fulfillment. Even worse, the constant comparison with others' curated presentations creates what researchers call compare culture, chronic dissatisfaction arising from comparing your internal reality with others' external presentations. You experience your full range of human struggles while seeing only others' highlights, creating the illusion that everyone else lives more fulfilling, successful, or happy lives than you do. This comparison culture fuels what might be called authenticity anxiety, the fear that your real self is inadequate compared to the polished presentations surrounding you online. Rather than inspiring greater authenticity, this anxiety drives people toward more elaborate performance, creating cycles where the gap between public persona and private reality grows wider over time. The ultimate tragedy is that people become strangers to themselves, so invested in maintaining their digital personas that they lose access to their authentic desires, values, and sources of satisfaction. They know how to perform themselves, but no longer know who they actually are beneath the performance. Digital connectivity has systematically dismantled the structures and practices that historically created genuine community, shared physical space, mutual dependence, long-term commitment, and the kind of sustained proximity that allows people to know each other beyond their self-presentations. What remains are networks of weak ties masquerading as communities, while providing none of community's essential functions. Traditional communities formed around necessity, proximity, and shared challenges that required cooperation for mutual survival and flourishing. Members knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, depended on each other for practical support, and developed relationships through sustained interaction over time, rather than curated exchanges optimized for public consumption. Digital networks eliminate these community-building elements by making interaction optional rather than necessary, temporary rather than sustained, and performance-based rather than need-based. People can join and leave online communities without consequence, engage superficially without commitment, and present idealized versions of themselves, without accountability to others who know their complete reality. The result is what sociologists call bowling alone, phenomenon amplified through technology. People who are theoretically connected to vast networks, but practically isolated from meaningful community support. They have hundreds or thousands of digital connections, but no one to call during emergencies, crises, or moments when authentic human support becomes essential. rather than entertaining. Online communities also suffer from what might be called homophily amplification, algorithmic systems that connect people with similar interests, beliefs, and characteristics, while reducing exposure to the diversity of perspectives and experiences that strengthen real communities. Instead of learning to navigate differences and find common ground with unlike others, people retreat into echo chambers that reinforce existing beliefs and prejudices. The absence of genuine community creates psychological vulnerability that digital platforms exploit by positioning themselves as community substitutes. People join online groups, seeking the belonging, support, and meaning that real communities provide, but find only the simulation of these benefits without their substance. The hunger for community drives deeper engagement with platforms that ultimately prevent community formation. Perhaps most tragically, the time and emotional energy invested in maintaining digital connections becomes unavailable for building local physical communities that could provide genuine mutual support, shared purpose, and the kind of interdependence that creates lasting social bonds. People become too busy managing their online relationships to develop offline relationships that could actually sustain them through life's inevitable challenges. Digital platforms have engineered sophisticated addiction mechanisms that exploit fundamental human needs for connection, validation, and social belonging to create psychological dependency on artificial forms of interaction that provide temporary satisfaction while preventing access to authentic relationship that could provide lasting fulfillment. The addiction operates through variable ratio reinforcement schedules, the same psychological mechanisms that make gambling addictive. Notifications, likes, comments, and messages arrive unpredictably, creating psychological dependency on external validation that becomes necessary for maintaining baseline emotional equilibrium. Users become trapped in cycles of posting, checking, and responding that feel voluntary but are actually compulsive. Brain imaging studies reveal that social media use activates the same reward circuits as addictive drugs, triggering dopamine release that creates tolerance, requiring increased use to achieve the same satisfaction. But unlike substances that provide predictable effects, social media's rewards are inconsistent and often disappointing, creating chronic dissatisfaction disguised as engagement. The addiction is maintained through what might be called connection substitution, artificial interactions that provide just enough psychological satisfaction to prevent people from seeking genuine relationship, while leaving them chronically undernourished socially. They feel connected enough to avoid confronting their loneliness, while remaining too isolated to experience the deep satisfaction that authentic human connection provides. Fear of missing out amplifies the addiction by creating anxiety about potential social experiences, information, or connections that might be happening elsewhere. This manufactured urgency keeps people in states of constant vigilance, checking platforms compulsively to avoid the imaginary costs of disconnection, while paying the very real costs of never being fully present with immediate experience or relationships. The addiction also exploits what psychologists recognize as social validation dependency, the gradual replacement of internal sources of self-worth with external metrics of social approval. When self-esteem becomes contingent on digital responses to online presentations, users become trapped in cycles of performance and validation seeking that prevent the development of authentic self-knowledge and internal confidence. Recovery from this addiction requires recognizing that the temporary satisfaction provided by digital connection is actually preventing access to lasting satisfaction that genuine relationship provides. Like any addiction, the substance that seems to solve the problem is actually creating and maintaining the problem, while making real solutions seem unnecessary or impossible. Breaking free from the curse of artificial connectivity requires deliberate practices that restore capacity for genuine relationship, authentic self-expression, and the kind of vulnerable, committed interaction that creates lasting satisfaction rather than temporary simulation of connection. The journey begins with what might be called digital detox, creating regular periods completely free from online interaction that allow psychological space for authentic desires, emotions, and social needs to emerge, without immediately being channeled into digital performance or consumption. This disconnection reveals the extent to which online engagement has become compulsive rather than chosen. Rebuilding authentic connection requires developing comfort with vulnerability, uncertainty, and the messiness of real human relationship that digital interaction allows users to avoid. This means accepting others as complete human beings rather than curated presentations, showing up as yourself rather than performing optimized versions of yourself, and engaging in the difficult work of sustained relationship rather than the easy consumption of digital entertainment. Physical presence becomes essential for relearning authentic connection. Face-to-face interaction provides non-verbal communication, shared physical space, and the kind of immediate presence that digital communication cannot replicate. Time spent in physical proximity allows people to experience each other beyond their self-presentations and develop relationships based on complete rather than curated humanity. Local community involvement provides opportunities for the kind of mutual dependence and shared purpose that create genuine social bonds, whether through volunteer work, community organizations, religious institutions, or neighborhood groups. Local engagement creates relationships based on shared work rather than shared consumption, mutual support rather than mutual entertainment. The practice also requires developing what might be called authenticity discipline, the commitment to honest self-expression and genuine interest in others that resist the constant pressure to optimize, perform, and present idealized versions of reality. This discipline involves sharing struggles as well as successes, asking genuine questions rather than making impressive statements, and prioritizing depth over breadth in relationships. Perhaps most challenging is learning to tolerate the slower pace, higher demands, and greater uncertainty that authentic relationship requires compared to digital interaction. Real relationships develop over extended time periods, require sustained commitment through difficulties, and cannot be controlled or optimized in the ways that digital presentations can be managed. The path I walked required recognizing that the hyper-connected world had created a sophisticated illusion of relationship that felt real enough to prevent me from seeking genuine connection while leaving me chronically starved for authentic human interaction. In breaking free from digital dependency, I discovered that what I had mistaken for connection was actually a form of isolation disguised as engagement. I learned that genuine relationship requires presence, vulnerability, and commitment that digital platforms systematically eliminate in favor of performance, control, and consumption. The convenience that makes online interaction appealing also makes it incapable of providing the nourishment that human beings require for psychological and emotional health. The research confirms what lived experience teaches. Despite unprecedented connectivity, loneliness has reached epidemic levels, precisely because digital connection substitutes simulation for reality, performance for authenticity, and temporary satisfaction for lasting fulfillment. We have created technologies that exploit our need for connection, while preventing the genuine connection we actually need. Your modern world presents you with a choice that previous generations never faced: whether to accept artificial connection as sufficient, or to demand the authentic relationship that technology promises, but cannot deliver. This choice determines not just your social life, but your psychological health, emotional development, and capacity for the kind of deep satisfaction that makes life meaningful rather than merely entertaining. The curse of our age: everyone connected, no one real, is not inevitable, but chosen, maintained through daily decisions, to prioritize convenience over commitment, performance over presence, and digital simulation over authentic relationship. Breaking this curse requires recognizing that the technologies designed to solve loneliness have become primary sources of the loneliness they promise to address. Begin by creating spaces in your life, completely free from digital mediation, where authentic thoughts, feelings, and desires can emerge without immediately being shaped into content for others' consumption. Notice what arises when you cannot immediately share, document, or perform your experiences for digital audiences. Så walk resolve into it with. Prioritize physical presence and sustained commitment in your relationships, accepting the inconvenience, uncertainty, and vulnerability that genuine connection requires. Choose depth over breadth, quality over quantity, and authentic interaction over optimized presentation in your social choices. Most importantly, remember that human beings evolved for genuine community, authentic relationship, and the kind of mutual dependence that creates lasting social bonds. No amount of digital innovation can substitute for the psychological and emotional nourishment that comes from being fully known, accepted, and supported by others who share your physical reality and committed presence. The connected yet unreal existence that characterizes modern life is not the inevitable result of technological progress, but the predictable consequence of mistaking simulation for reality, performance for authenticity, and artificial connection for genuine relationship. In choosing authentic connection over digital convenience, you reclaim not just your social life, but your humanity itself. Everyone is connected, yet no one is real. But this curse can be broken by those willing to risk the vulnerability, commitment, and authentic presence that genuine relationship requires. In a world of artificial connection, authentic relationship becomes both radical act and essential medicine for the isolation epidemic that digital connectivity has created, while promising to solve. The choice is yours. Remain connected, but unreal, or become real through the authentic connection that no technology can provide, but only authentic human commitment can create.